G'day buddies, I am Jacaro Toro, and on this channel I focus on Australian Aborigines, their languages, cultures, and history and so on. So in the previous video I started to look at food, things Australian Aborigines ate in a more traditional society. And I talked about semi-agricultural practices. Well, today I thought I'd continue in the same vein. And today I want to focus on grass. There is in fact a whole host of grass species in Australia with edible seeds. And I want to talk about tobacco. You see, I'm not sure if people are aware, but there are a number of indigenous Australian tobacco species. And it seems to be a long-standing tradition for the Aborigines to chew tobacco. But starting with grass. There is a grass belt in which people, Aborigines that is, in traditional times would seem to have eaten a lot of grass seeds and to use them to make meal that was turned into bread. This is an area away from the coasts because along these coasts here there are lots of grass-feeding termites. So it's an area away from the coast where there is enough precipitation so that a good crop of grass grows every year. But it also gets dry enough so that the termites don't like those areas. So that's an area stretching from roughly here up in a belt here and down in a wider area here. So not in the real desert or deserts in the central part of Australia, but rather between the coasts and the desert. And Norman Tindale writes about this area, or wrote perhaps, in his 1974 book. He wrote that there are indications that tribes in these grasslands were larger than the average Australian Aboriginal tribe. And according to Tindale, the average Australian Aboriginal tribe in pre-colonial times had around 400 to 500 people. And Tindale speculates about whether this could have something to do with the grass-based economy. So he has a long section where he describes how the seeds were winnowed. There were several stages in the cleaning process that involved shallow wooden dishes, some of them with grooves in them, which made it easier, evidently, to separate the seeds from dirt. And then the seeds were milled. Yes, this was women's work. They had a larger bottom millstone, 15 inches, 40 centimeters roughly, according to Tindale, and then a much smaller upper stone. And a small heap of seeds was placed on the millstone, and then they would wet it. The women doing this work would wet it. Where did they keep the water for wetting the seeds? Actually, they kept it in their mouths. So this was not up to modern Western health standards, to put it that way, but that's what they did. So, a squirt of water from the mouth, and then the upper hand stone was placed on top of the seeds and was used to push the seeds into a wooden dish which was placed underneath the millstone. This was repeated a number of times. So it was placed back up again, and it was repeated. And then when enough meal had accumulated, the whole soft mass was poured onto a bed of white hot ashes. And it was covered with ash and left until fully cooked. Yes. And then perhaps we can move on to tobacco. So the only luxury crop they had in traditional times in Australia. So Tindale writes that he observed in the Western Desert, when he was doing field work in the 1920s, 1930s, that Aborigines were very attentive to the natural growths of, for example, the species Nicotiana excelsior, which grows well at the mouths of caves and rock shelters. And in Tindale's opinion, the Aborigines did not necessarily understand why tobacco grew well in such places, but nevertheless they were very attentive, and these growths became like private gardens to be harvested by the group who claimed ownership of the area. And they fire wilted tobacco leaves and mixed with the ashes of acacia and chewed that. And in fact, trespassing into another clan's territory to take tobacco, that was considered a serious offense. Yes, but I think this will be all for today. So, see you later.